Hello there folks, I'm Dan Brown from sortofinteresting.com and today you are joining me on board good old narrowboat Abel's Ark for a chat about what my life was actually like during the 2 years between spending 4 years living on board narrowboat Tilly to moving on to dry land and then earlier this year buying Abel's Ark and moving back onto the canals. And originally I was going to do this look back video really early on in my boat life, or my second boat life. And I realised when I was sitting down thinking about what I wanted to talk about that when I looked back at when I left narrowboat life and narrowboat Tilly, I don't feel the same way about things. Now there's distance and, well, even really a couple of months after leaving narrowboat Tilly, I felt differently to some of the things that I'd written down and talked about in videos over the period of leaving narrowboat Tilly to then being off the canals and what have you. So anyway, I suppose, without further ado, let's get stuck in. Right then my friends, there's probably just been a really hard cut in the video at some point to start this little section. Now, I've just spent a while talking about bits and pieces of dry land life, and there's something that I think that I'm going to put in this video here now, and that's a few minutes of a short film that I made called The Rise and Fall of the Narrowboat Lad. So that'll be in this video for the next couple of minutes, and really, as I was talking in the original recording of this video, I had to try and keep giving context to what my life was like before I ever had narrowboat Tilly, so that you could then really understand when I left the canals. It wasn't as if I'd lived a totally normal life beforehand, but not as if I lived a wild, mad life at all either. Anyway, I just thought it's a little bit sad maybe this, but I just think it's something that probably a lot of people haven't seen, that short film, and, well, it's something that'll give you an awful lot of context about me and how I live my life and why I find probably boat life so attractive that I've returned. Anyway, let's dial it in. Hello there folks, I'm Dan Brown. Hello there folks, I'm Dan Brown. Hello there folks, I'm Dan Brown. 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 You're joining me on board good old narrowboat Tilly. Good old narrowboat Tilly. 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 My humble narrowboat home Tilly. I've just sold narrowboat Tilly. It's paid for, just handed over the keys literally 10 minutes ago, signed the papers, it's all done, Tilly is gone, the Dan and narrowboat Tilly era is all over. This is me, Dan, and the narrowboat Tilly that I spent 4 years living on board. Or as I normally like to say, I spent 4 years living on the canals and in the great outdoors and all over the countryside. And I've got to say, it was an absolutely fantastic time of my life. It was such an interesting, unique way of life, tootling about on the canals and, well, as you're seeing on the screen now, being out in the middle of nowhere, going through locks at a leisurely pace and just enjoying being in nature. It was absolutely fantastic. But to really understand what it was all about and why I gave it up, we need to look back at my life long before I ever stepped foot onto a boat. If you look at my life in the years in the run-up to buying narrowboat Tilly, you'll see a very active young man, and it may immediately become clear why the idea of living on board a boat and going out in the countryside and having to walk and cycle everywhere I wanted to go or get to would appeal to me, living the life that I did, and my core interests of walking, cycling, writing, astronomy, and just generally being out in amazing places like these ones you're seeing on the screen now. And that's why ultimately, when the idea of living on a boat was suggested as a joke by one of my friends to me, I thought, you know what, this actually sounds fantastic. So there I was in my early 20s, still living at home with my mum, and I thought to myself, well, I suppose I better start saving to buy a boat. Now, when I say something like living at home with my mum, that probably conjures up an image to most people that's a little bit less accurate with my admittedly slightly unusual and very, very active life, as very often I was away from the house by a factor of several hundred miles for a couple of weeks here or a week there and so on, camping and all the rest of it. And even just in day-to-day life, I would find myself ending up at friends' houses for a couple of nights here and different relatives' houses. I'd say that this ultimately led me to live a far less rooted and far less solidly anchored life than the description of living at home with my mum would generally give the impression of. And I'd say probably for the last few years up until I bought Narrowboat Tilly, I've probably on very few occasions spent more than 4, maybe 5 days in a row actually sleeping at my mum's house, and on occasion would sometimes just disappear off and live at my friend's house for a couple of weeks. And yeah, it was an absolutely fantastic time of life. It was a very carefree time, a very sort of enjoyable, laid back time with some great people, and I honestly think that I was as lucky in that period in the build up to buying a boat as I was to actually live on the boat itself for 4 years that I did. But then something happened that completely and utterly brought me back to reality with a thud, out of the perfect little life that I'd been living, running around in the countryside as if nothing ever really mattered. I was at one of my friends' houses one evening, and we both received a message, and we thought, no, this can't possibly be right, what's going on? And a few minutes later we received a phone call, and couldn't believe what we were hearing. It was true. One of our friends had killed himself. He was only 19, and it came as an absolutely massive shock and was unbelievably sad. I have absolutely no issue admitting that I cried like an absolute baby that night, and it was something that led to an unbelievably thoughtful, reflective, and just a generally strange and very quiet time in my life, and it made me think about a lot of things. I was already chasing this narrowboat dream idea, with the idea of it being a nice simple life and all of the outdoor stuff that I enjoy and so on. But I'd always said that I wanted to avoid what I saw a lot of around me, which was people working every hour they could to gain the acceptable standard of living, but without any real time to enjoy the things they wanted to, because they were always at work to pay for the stuff they had. And when somebody so young like that was taken, it absolutely terrified me. Ultimately, it made me more determined to enjoy life and to get out there and do all these things that I wanted, and as much of it as soon as I possibly could. So I hope you enjoyed that little clip there, and the main takeaway from it, I know it's a bit sad, but the main takeaway that I'd like to have from it is that before I ever had Narrowboat Tilly, I was already living a very active and relatively rootless lifestyle, where I was always spending nights here, there and everywhere, and just generally out and about all the time at every possible moment. And when I look back, it's unbelievable just how much time and how many miles I was putting in, whether that be on my bike or in my boots or somewhere cuddling up in a tent going, ooh, it's a bit chilly tonight. But in all honesty and being realistic, genuinely I was all over the place before I bought Narrowboat Tilly. So buying a boat to live on and to move around on the canal on, it wasn't such a big sort of shock to my system, because I was used to spending a lot of time at, well, all sorts of different places, and the fact almost that I had a boat that I could take with me to different places was giving me more of a routine to at least a certain place, even if that place did move on the canal. A little bit of a logical leap to make there of that statement, but you know what I'm trying to say. So when I moved on to Narrowboat Tilly, it was absolutely wonderful. Oh, we've got somebody going past here. So basically, obviously, living on Narrowboat Tilly, it was one of those moments where it's like, right, I'm here, it's all new, it's all a novelty. I get to see everything about boat life for the first time. So even though I was terrified of everything that ever happened on the canal in those early times on board, I also had that great excitement of, wow, look at this, oh, look at this, oh wow, kingfisher, herons, this, that and the other, newts in the water, and all of these first experiences, even things like the first snowfall on board that were making life a lot harder than it had been in the summer, it still had the novelty and the excitement factor to buoy me up and power me through that early, more difficult time of adapting to various elements of boat life. So narrowboat life was absolutely fine. I thoroughly enjoyed it on Narrowboat Tilly, but for reasons I've listed many times over, obviously in the end I decided to give it up after about 4 years on board. And when I was moving back to dry land, I knew that I wanted to have my own place. I knew that I just couldn't move back in with my mum or live with any of my family, and that not because of any reason specifically to do with them, but because I got so used to having my own little home where I could properly relax and just be totally calm and totally sort of, I don't know what that, people out there may get this, I may understand what I'm trying to say here, of when you've got your own place where there's nobody else, you can get back in the evenings or after work or whenever, and as soon as you close that door behind you, you're totally free, there's nobody around, no one's judging you if you're going to sprawl out on the floor and eat chocolate or something. Terrible example, but you know what I'm trying to say. It's like you can be totally calm and totally relaxed. And so I knew I wanted my own place. I'm just going to clear my throat and have a drink, my apologies. Right, I'm back. Anyway, as I said, I wanted to have my own place on dry land, and as I was looking at places to rent, because first of all, even if I'd been in a position where I could have bought a house and what have you, as many of you know, my entire life and my philosophy that's allowed me to do a lot of the stuff I've done in my life is to never have any debt of any description ever, and rather wait and save up for stuff, or not have stuff at all, rather than be indebted and have to worry about making sure that I can keep this money coming in for some sort of binding here or there. So I've done a huge video talking about this, and basically I've literally have gone without, and it's made my life harder, and I could have had more stuff or whatever if that was important than I have done. But instead I've had the freedom of not having any financial burden to, oh, you've got to pay this, you've got to pay that. And it's served me well. I think on balance, for my lifestyle, it's worked well for me, but obviously it certainly wouldn't work for everybody. So anyway, I first of all would be very concerned about going from boat life to dry land and getting into a mortgage for years and years on end, because first of all it'd be that shock of actually having the debt for the first time in my life, but also because obviously I was concerned that 6 months time of, or after 6 months of dry land, 12 months, I might be completely sick of it and thinking I want another boat. And as you can see, what happened was I managed to make it about 2 years, not even 2 full years I don't think, before that happened. So obviously I was very concerned about that when I left Narrowboat Tilly, and didn't want to get into a position where it's going to be very difficult for me to leave land life because of having to make sure that I could sell my place to cover the cost of the mortgage and still have enough money to buy a boat, and all those potential pitfalls you could fall in. So obviously I was looking at renting somewhere for at least a short term on dry land, and as I was looking at places to rent, you know, I thought, as a treat, after living a rough and ready life out here on Narrowboat Tilly, I'm going to find myself somewhere that's maybe a little bit more expensive. I'm not just going to go for the cheapest option like I often would in many cases with many things in life. And so I thought, you know what, let's actually look for somewhere that I actually really want to live. And that's something that, again, because of my lifestyle, it had put me in the position where I could say, you know what, I'll go for somewhere more expensive, although admittedly I couldn't have lived there indefinitely without changing my life to up my income and what have you. But just for that moment of being able to sit down on dry land and be like, oh, I actually love this place that I live, I thought, you know what, let's just do it. It's my treat to myself after 4 years of very simple basic living. And I'm very glad that I did that, to be honest, because when it came to moving from land life, I knew that I'd lived about the best sort of version of land life that I could. But I ended up living at the top of this beautiful old building in Oswestry Street called the Vic, or Victoria House, and had me balcony that overlooked the rooftops of town. And even though it was a very central place in Oswestry, because you were 5 stories or so up, it was actually really quiet, and you could open the big patio door onto the balcony, and because the town was so much lower than you, there was barely any noise, and it was unbelievable but there was actually many times where it was quieter in my flat on the top floor of the place in the middle of Oswestry than it was out on the canal. And it was an unbelievable thing. And so basically, as time went on, I sort of moved into there. I realised that I had absolutely no furniture, but I was really against buying a lot of furniture, and I had my desk for my little computer setup and stuff like that, and I just basically started living in a very empty flat, for want of a better term. And because of the weird way the rooms are set up, it had like a huge living room, which by the time that I was leaving land life, this huge living room I had turned into a bedroom where the foot of my bed looked over onto the balcony from onto the balcony and up through the patio windows into the sky, and that was perfect at night. I had a little sort of I had a little living room section. It went through various setups and layouts, this place, and hopefully you're seeing something on the screen from this time. And basically, this room was so big, it had my bedroom, it had my little banana box studio that I'd created with a load of banana boxes as soundproofing, as well as 2 double air beds as soundproof walls. So you can imagine how big that section was. And then on top of that as well, it had an actual living room area. So you can imagine when I first moved into... Sorry, there's a little bit of dust floating around here. So you can imagine when I moved in there, and I had no furniture to fill up that space, plus I had the bedroom, which by the time I'd made the living room into the 3 sections, the bedroom had just become a train room where I was building my original 00 gauge model railway. And that was the sort of, for me on my own, it was too big basically. And even though it was only 1 bedroom, it was still too big because I just didn't have any stuff. And I think the fact that even when I left, all of my stuff could fit comfortably into the living room and bedroom. Again, it sums up the difference in where I was at my life and where I still am and may well always be in my life in terms of possessions. It doesn't interest me. I mean, like on the boat, the first thing that I got on board Abelzak was the desk and the chair, and that's the most important thing to me because obviously doing me videos, doing me writing and stuff like that, and because I don't have a telly on board, it's also the centre of sort of entertainment, although I suppose my phone is because I listen to huge amounts of audiobooks and podcasts throughout the day. But you get the general idea. It took me months and months to buy the sofa that I'm now on here, to put that in the flat. So when anybody would come round, I just had some simple chairs. Then it took me maybe the best part of a year to actually buy a telly when I was in the flat, which I then gave to my mum when I moved out of the flat. And that was it. I basically just lived in this big empty shell. It was a beautiful empty shell, don't get me wrong, and I loved being able to stand on the balcony and rest up against the side, looking at the rooftops and seeing Oswestry go about its daily life. And you could look over into the distance and see all different markers of places in the countryside that I'd be able to go, oh well, that's blah 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 on the canal, that's blah 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 on the canal. And it was great. I basically just carried on living to a large extent how I lived on Narrowboat Tilly, but from a fixed big place, which was obviously huge compared to a tiny 30-foot narrowboat. And I basically just started to explore more of the places around Oswestry from a slightly different area of Oswestry that I'd usually set out from, and that's really all I can say if I'm completely honest. And it was great, and particularly that first year or so, I think it was just a wonderful little experience where I carried on spending loads of time out and about walking and cycling and just in the countryside in general. I'd bought a mega gaming laptop and stuff when I'd moved off Narrowboat Tilly, because that was another part of my sort of treat to myself, because I'd really been a massive gamer and massive nerd in years gone by, and obviously on Narrowboat Tilly that had all had to come to an end. And I could never really get back into it properly in the way that I had been. And so, whereas some people acted in a hysterical manner on YouTube, where everything that I would post after I'd left Narrowboat Life, it was that thing where I actually posted a little sort of tongue-in-cheek video where I was like, basically sort of almost taking the mick out of myself, saying like, oh, I've heard that now you don't live on a boat, all you do is sit around playing World of Warcraft all day. And then the camera cut to me saying, no, and then I'd look and realise that World of Warcraft was running on my laptop in the background, so I'd be like, oh, and then it cut to just loads of scenery from all of the trips I'd been doing out and about since moving off Narrowboat Tilly. And that sort of was just there meant to really illustrate, like, just because I happen to own a laptop doesn't mean that I don't love the outdoors still. I didn't just change in an instant when I moved off the canals. So really, to a great extent, a lot of elements of my life of being this sort of slight lonerish, but always out and about in the countryside, and all of those elements continued on into dry land life. It just happened that I was in a far bigger, more comfortable dwelling that I couldn't just untie and move a little bit down the road if I wanted to. And during that time, various people came and went in my life, and various relationships were born and died and all the rest of it. And in all honesty, a couple of times where, in hindsight, I think, had I have been maybe a little bit more relaxed about things, then could have settled down into a relationship, and that probably would have been that, and you would have never heard of me again. And I don't know, in hindsight, obviously there's all sorts of things that you'd always do differently in life, but it does make me wonder if I'd have been a little bit more relaxed, and certainly in some cases being like, well, this is all going well, could have moved in together, settled down, and like I say, that could have been the end of Dan Brown the Narrowboat Lad. And, well, probably came very close to that happening on one or more occasions. But moving from that dangerous topic very quickly, it is something that I have given some thought in the past, and in recent times as well, that if various things had happened and that, then I would have never been in a position maybe thinking, oh, a bit bored of land life now, what's the plan now? What am I going to do? Just do this for years to come? Might as well just get a boat. And really, all of land life can be summed up in a few simple sentences and statements. It was still relatively minimal compared to other people who were living in the building and living in general on land life, because I didn't really have much stuff. And as I say, it wasn't until I had my the room that had been my bedroom dedicated to being simply for my model railway layout, that my living room was actually filled with stuff, because it had everything else that I owned basically in there, which gives you an indicator, as I say, of the sort of still relatively minimal life I was living. The fact that I could dedicate my bedroom to just being a model railway room itself indicates how I sort of viewed my life and how I viewed the property, and that I wasn't particularly interested in conforming to any sort of normal, sensible ideals. And that's certainly something that when some people would visit after I'd moved all the furniture around, like, hang on, what? Your bed's, your recording studio, your living room? What's in there? And then I'd open it up and it'd just be this ridiculous board with all these train bits and pieces on it. But again, the final thing, like I say, it was still very active, and at one point I was trying to ride 15 miles a day for 100 days in a row, and it was a terrible idea, because I'd started to pick up a few, again, this is one of those things, I'd started to pick up a few more hours at work, not because I was like desperate for money or needed it desperately or anything, but because it was almost that thing of like, well, I'm not going boating today, I'm not doing this or that, I'd sort of really taken a huge step back from YouTube, which I think in many respects was a good thing, because it allowed me to then have a part of my life that I could remember of the last 5 years or so that wasn't constantly worrying about doing videos, do this, do that, do this, do that. And so I sort of just literally started to get bored. And so obviously I'd started filling my time with all sorts of different things, and like I say, the model railway was a huge thing that filled an awful lot of time. And again, I was still spending a huge amount of time in the great outdoors, and that 15 mile a day bike ride challenge ended in failure. I think it got to 20 something days, I think, off the top of my head. And basically, trying to fit in these 15 miles around all the other stuff that I was doing, it was absolutely killing me, and it just absolutely killed my back, because I might be like, say, oh, I'll go to work, so I'll either go out on my bike, and sometimes I'd go out at midnight, so that after midnight it would technically be a new day that I'd do my 15 miles on. Sometimes I'd be waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning, going out on my bike, and then going into work for the day or whatever. But just that mixture of not giving my back a rest from my bike, and then being huddled over, maybe doing me writing or working on me little models for the railway and stuff, it just killed me back too much in the end, and I just had to call it quits. But it just shows, though, there was still that attempt, and there was still that inherent, I'm going to make time to get outside no matter what I'm doing, even if it was unworkable and unfeasible and I had to cut it out because it was too much. But again, oh sorry, creaky floorboards there. It's those sorts of things that illustrate that I still wasn't living what people might consider a standard everyday life on dry land. And as I got a little bit more bored, and not so much bored, I don't know, maybe that's the wrong word, but restless, I started to do other random things. Like I say, I was moving the setup of the flat around all the time, and then I started getting into absolutely mad lighting setups with all sorts of different stuff going on, which you may have seen on the screen already in this video. I hope you have. And of course, there's just all of these things that were just sort of distractions almost, and then different people again would come in and out of my life, and again, I almost lost focus, I suppose you could say, because I was like, what is there to worry about? What is there to do? I haven't got to move the boat. I haven't got to do this. I haven't got to bike in and out of to the boat every time I go to work or go to town and stuff. So I don't know, it's an interesting thing really, and I'm still not sure whether I'm far enough away from that part of my life to correctly analyse it, and I'm not still got various biases of what I might not believe in another year or so's time when I look back at the end of my life on dry land. And anyway, I suppose really, let's talk more about wrapping up dry land life. So it was probably just before Christmas 2017 that I'd started to have these thoughts of, you know what, if this is all I'm going to do on dry land, why don't I just get another boat instead of paying a fortune every month out to somebody else's bank account in my rent and things like that, when I can just be like, you know what, I like boat life, I've done it already, I love boat life, it's going to free me up because it's not going to be that financial burden. And like I say, although I wasn't struggling, and I was picking up hours here and there to just cover me if I did feel like, oh, I want these extra bits for my model railway here and what have you. So as I say, I basically just was like, yeah, let's go for it. Let's actually have a look at a boat and all the rest of it. And then I thought, no, hold on a minute. Don't get this idea in your head and then run off straight to look at boats and be all excited and buy one. Wait, patience, boy, for heaven's sake. So I sat on the idea for a while and I didn't tell anybody, and I sort of left YouTube to a great extent at this point anyway, so I didn't have outside forces going, buy another boat and things like that. And I left it for a few weeks over Christmas, and then I thought, you know what, I think I do actually want a boat. So I went off on the bus to Ellesmere to have a look at some boats for sale. And I honestly can't explain to you that first thing of sitting down, that first moment of stepping on board a boat and just having a look around and being like, wow, this is the first time I've been on a boat for a long time, and it's a boat that I just happen to potentially be buying. And honestly, I can't tell you how that initial thing was like, yep, I could happily live on a boat again. And in that split second of getting on board, opening the door, stepping down onto it, looking around, I was like, yeah, this'll do me. I can happily live on a boat. And it sort of was it wasn't necessarily a good job or a good indicator that I should have waited to start looking at boats and buying a boat. But it's something, people walking past again, something that I was glad I did, because then I knew that I still wanted to look at boats weeks and weeks after first starting to have those thoughts and ideas, and then obviously going in with a calmer mindset to look at boats and absolutely loving the idea of getting back onto a boat. It gave me that instant thing of like, yes, we can do this, let's get stuck into boat life again. So then obviously there was a few various things going on where I had to obviously get rid of everything that I had from my dry land life, and obviously there's so much furniture that I had to either give to charity, sold a bit of it, gave a bit of it to my friends and family, and just really sorted out a lot of my life. And as I say, even though the place had been empty and bare, it suddenly felt as if I had a huge amount of stuff, and it just reminded me of just how minimal my life on Narrowboat Tilly had been. And then looking obviously at something like Abel's Ark, which is twice the indoor space of Narrowboat Tilly, and has the covers over the back and the front, that everything's just so much more comfortable and so much easier. And that's specifically what I was looking for in moving back to the canals. I'm older now than I was when I bought Narrowboat Tilly. I'm not as fit as I was and all these different things. So I wanted to make sure that if we had a harsh winter, for example, like we have had 2 weeks up until the last couple of days of really bad weather, it's been really wet and windy and rainy all the time, and some very cold snaps thrown in with that too. And obviously, my life on Narrowboat Tilly, I had to just get inside, like I say, with me wet clothes and all that sort of stuff. Whereas, obviously on Abel's Ark, I've got an outdoor area there on the back that you can stand up in, but it's completely undercover, so it's outside of the main cabin area. So my wet clothes and shoes and bike and stuff I can leave under there to dry off and to sort themselves out. I can obviously fetch my bike inside if I'm worried about security, and I put the bike up in the shower so that if it's wet the water can drain off it and stuff like that. So it's far more convenient and far more sensible, and that was the core of what I knew I had to do if I was going to come back to narrowboat life. And so obviously now that I'm 7 or so months in, maybe a little bit longer now, into boat life again, we're starting to see different weather conditions and that, and having a bigger, more sensible boat to live on, it's so much more comfortable. And I've often said and thought that if I'd have bought a boat like this when I first bought Narrowboat Tilly, instead of getting excited and getting stuck into boat life as soon as I possibly could, then maybe, just maybe, I never would have left narrowboat life in the first place, because it wouldn't have been such a rough and ready existence. I mean, just something like these cold nights we've been having, it's so much easier to heat this boat and get it nice and toasty and warm on board than it was the flat that I was living in, which had these huge high ceilings in it and stuff. And again, there's these different things that, there's certain things I've obviously got to learn and pick up again about boat life, even including the heating, but it's still so much more comfortable and so much easier than Narrowboat Tilly was, and has benefits over the flat in many respects as well, that I've walked back to boat life. And it's one of those things that some nights I've sat here over the last few weeks thinking, can't believe I ever left this life, and then I look back to Narrowboat Tilly and think, but that was a different type of boat life compared to what I've got now. I'm effectively living in in a long, narrow flat almost in some respect, especially if I pay for a mooring somewhere. Anyway, this video's gone totally haywire, and I've got a 30-minute video file just of this talking to edit through and cut out all of the drinks and coughing and spluttering that I did. Plus the 6 minutes or so that's already recorded before this section. Oh my goodness me, this is going to be a huge bit of editing, my friends. Right, without further ado, I'm simply going to say at this point, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this completely rambling, blathering on video I've done. If you're really interested and want to help me out, please consider checking out my short boat life books, available for the Kindle, one of them as an audiobook and as a paperback as well. Until next time though, my friends, you'll find links to that in the description. You'll find me on Facebook and Twitter, all those sorts of things where I post lots of boaty imagery and stuff like that. And I'll just say, as always, my friends, have an absolutely fantastic day. Keep it interesting, keep it boat worthy, and of course, my friends, farewell.